Welcome back to our panel discussion, Securing Federal Mobility from the Full Spectrum of Mobile Risk, sponsored by Lookout and Carasoft here on Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. My guests today are Josh Franklin, Information Security Engineer at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Brian Varine is Chief for Cyber Threat Intelligence at the Justice Department. Vincent Sritapan is Program Manager for Mobile Security Research at Homeland Security's Science and Technology Directorate. And Bob Stevens, Vice President of Public Sector at Lookout. And in this segment, I want to do just a little publication review because NIST, among its many well-read special publications, SP's the 800 series, is number 124, which covers mobile device management enterprise as it relates to the enterprise. What are some of the best practices in there? I know it's a big, thick book. And what's new? What's new in there?
Sure, yeah. So as NIST writes voluntary guidance for the federal government in terms of mobility. NIST 800-124 revision 1 is the actual primary mobility publication. It basically provides guidance for how to select phones, for what various policies that you should be delivering to your phones, what sort of written policies you should be giving to employees for issues regarding privacy, and just acknowledgement of that, and that there will be monitoring of information on a federal device, and then just basic life cycle management. How do you purchase, use, and then properly dispose. NIST also has guidance for using cellular networks. There are some U.S. government agencies needing to operate their own private cellular network, and then there are also best practices for essentially mobile app vetting. So taking apps and then doing static analysis and dynamic analysis, and making sure that the apps that you allow your employees to install are not essentially malware.
Sure, yeah, good idea. And Vincent, as you've mentioned earlier, DHS has its own publication out now on mobile security. Just came out in May. And what are some of the top highlights there?
Oh, so I mean, the first takeaway is that the mobile threats are real and they exist throughout the entire ecosystem. If you want to go into it and get scared, just read the whole thing, I guess. But the idea here is whether it's the device, the applications, the network you reside on, your back-end infrastructure, cloud solutions that you would consume. All of those have both internal and external threats, right? Internal in the sense of, I might have an insider threat. I might not configure or manage things appropriately, which is a lot of problems. And then the other part, external, is a bad guy actually targeting us. And just by being a government employee, we have high-value targets that have different type of information we don't necessarily want to have out in the public. So the threats are real, whether it's coming over the wire or coming through an application or somewhere on our mobile device. And so, we do talk about there's a need for mobile security, and a lot of things that you'll see NIST publishing, it's great, but it's not required, right? And so we're pushing really hard for things like FISMA for FY18. That was the Fed CIO Council's Mobile Technology Tiger Team, Josh and myself, actually helping with that group to come up with those metrics, and which will be progressive over time. Things like CDM, continuous diagnostics and mitigation, including mobile, that's a push, a result out of this study. And so you're seeing real change happening today, but yes, the threat's real, and yes, you need to budget and prioritize for it. Just because you don't see it coming out of U.S. cert alerts doesn't mean they're not there. It's just go look up Ars Technica, and you'll probably find a new mobile threat every twice a week minimum, every week.
Sure.
And
yep.
So.
I do check that one from time to time too, and the hacking news, I think, is another one. There's a lot of good sources of really bad stuff. Brian and also Bob, I have a question about another element that has come big time into the federal IT scene, and that's affecting mobility, and that is cloud resources that are also accessed by mobile devices as opposed to simply what's behind your firewall in your data center. How has that changed your approach to mobile security, and do people access cloud resources mobily?
Right now we don't have people, unless it's like a software as a service, but what we do for some of our mail apps, like we have a software as a service for cloud mail, we still make them go through our trusted internet connection so that we can monitor what's going on. All of our email gets scanned. We have an on-prem stack. I don't know that cloud is going to change the way mobility works too much. I know the issue that you have to understand is just because you moved it to the cloud, it can actually reduce your security if you don't do it right. All that stuff that you have on-prem, all the firewalls, intrusion detection, sandboxing, you have to rebuild that out in the cloud. So a lot of people want to push these applications into the cloud because they believe that they're going to get better performance out of those. But once you start adding all the security features in that you need, you might find that, hey, routing them through a tick is actually more efficient. So what we're starting to do is try to figure out how do we build our ticks better with better latency so that we can still run it through our security requirements and then route it to the cloud. So cloud definitely changes the way, it doesn't change the way we operate mobile, it changes the way we operate IT, and it's a huge change.
Right, right. Well, yeah, and on the latency question, that's one of the advantages of cloud. If you have virtual machines located physically in a scattered fashion across the world or the country, then at least on the online wired systems, that does reduce latency, or has the potential to.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends too on what type of system we're talking about. If it's, hey, we want to allow our users to have access to a criminal database, we're going to be very, security is going to be very, very important. If it's, hey, I want to go, read some of the pubs like from National Institutes of Justice for the reporting. There's nothing sensitive in there, so yeah, put it out in the cloud and let them access it. So it really depends on what type of data we want to make accessible via the cloud, but it's more of a mobility, it's bigger than mobile, it's how we operate IT. So there's a lot of effort going into that.
And Bob, what about mobile device management and security services that are not in the data center?
So while, as Brian said, the cloud may not change the mobile operation, but it is changing mobile security. And Brian mentioned earlier he's concerned about battery life. Well, if you're doing your analytics in the cloud versus doing it on the device, then you have very little impact on the battery. Lookout started as a consumer product, and we learned a lot from that. One was if we affected the battery, then the app got pulled off pretty quickly. How do you prevent that? Well, you do a lot of the analytics in the cloud, which allows you to do it near real time and provide near real time feedback to the user so they can mitigate or do something about the risk that they just downloaded.
So, in other words, the implication is that can work in the enterprise also.
Yes.
The idea of, so how does it work? You pull the device and then analyze what you've pulled somewhere else, but not on the device itself?
Sure. So if you downloaded an application and we have never seen that application before, what we'll do is we'll pull that that application up into the cloud and we'll analyze it or compare it to all the other applications that we've seen in the world, which is about 45 million, somewhere in that neighborhood at this point. And we can pretty quickly tell you whether that application has an opportunity to be malicious in any way. So big data analytics is also a very big part of doing proper mobile security.
Yeah, how does that work? Let's elaborate on that. And anyone else, feel free to jump in on predictive analytics for mobile security.
Sure. You want again, when you download that app, and if we've never seen it, we'll pull it. And we'll start to compare it to all the other applications that we've seen throughout the world. So we're doing the static analysis, the dynamic analysis, the behavioral analysis, the heuristics, line by line comparison, so that who signed it. So we can pretty predictively tell you whether that application represents a risk to you or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we're looking to do is, the corporations, they're going to be seeing all these applications where us at the department, we're only going to see a few applications. So it's better to use those analytics that are offered that's looking at the whole ecosystem across the world, so we can leverage what they're doing a lot better than if we tried to build it ourselves and let them do the analysis, let them do what they're good at. We reap the benefits of, guy downloads something onto his machine, It goes up to the vendor. The vendor says, hey, you might want to take a look at that. It's where that happens. Like, does it go to our security operations center? Does it go to the user? Where does it go? And what actions do we take after that? So
It's almost like having corporate food tasters before people
correct,
use the app
yeah.
to make sure
And
that it's,
well, the thing is too, you know, there's a real challenge trying to find people that in cyber, right? There's a real shortage of workforce. Now you're going to narrow it down even more and say, hey, I want somebody that's good at mobile cyber, and I want somebody that's mobile cyber that does app vetting and all those types of things. So you're starting to really narrow down your skill set. In the federal government, it would be really hard to find that kind of expertise at one particular agency. So those are the types of areas where it's like, hey, let's outsource it to somebody that's their focus, that's their job, and not only that, we can share the cost with the corporate people who want the same thing. Because we're not going to vet that many apps during the week. These guys are, you know, probably doing 10 an hour.
And I'll say, I mean, for predictive analytics or big data analytics, I mean, you have to use the cloud. It's sort of having it on device and all the data there, it doesn't work. The battery, both not battery usage, but just for processing power, capacity of the mobile phone, it can't compare to what you can have in the cloud. And we use this even today when we try not to use the cloud, but it's just like, hey, we'll get a rule feed or some kind of signature feed on a device. But the truth is, having it readily available there, in synchronous, is really what we want and need. You can, use the power of the cloud. I mean, the efficiencies that you get from there, and then being able to take that threat intelligence, right, and bring it over. I would say even trying to put it in a data center is hard. You really, really do need the cloud just because of the power that it does bring. And so having that available to you and bringing it for predictive analytics, you can think of things like, well, hey, if I see a strand of mobile malware out there or from an unofficial market, but before it gets to the official markets, I might see segments or parts of that being used, and I can actually identify it in advance before it comes on my device. Having things like that, having that kind of threat intelligence for mobile is going to be quite powerful.
And a couple of questions in the time we have left. I want to ask about applications, and we described in some detail how the vetting works. As an organization, and looking at your users' behavior, they want apps. Can the source of the app be a predictor of how safe it is? For example, if it's a major hotel chain, and you check in there and they have a lot at stake in with what they offer, when you go into their rooms, they're going to be clean, the plumbing is going to work, and you're going to have a decent experience. When they deploy their mobile apps, have they been developed in the same way that they developed their rooms, so to speak, or was that outsourced somewhere and they really don't care about some of the heuristics and so forth that you're concerned with?
I think that most of the major chains like that do a very good job of ensuring that their applications are secure. The issue is really how many people are copying their brand and how many of their apps exist for you to download that are malicious. As an example, you pick any major hotel chain, I would venture to say that there's probably thousands of applications out there that weren't written by the hotel chain. And because the bad guys are targeting that chain, they want you to download that popular application so that they can infect you.
Yeah, we just do the same thing. Do the mobile app vetting, and we look at what is that application doing. I would not expect major hotels to have an application company. So there's going to be a few companies that do a bulk of the application development. So that's why you would use a third party to kind of rank those applications. Like, hey, this is coming from a trusted vendor. A lot of those applications share the same code because they're developed by the same company. So the companies that are vetting these apps, they're going to have a pretty good idea of, hey, this code is relatively safe. But maybe they get one that says, hey, it says it's written by this company, but everything else is not matching up. So maybe that's where they flag that, and then maybe they get a hold of the company that actually coded it and say, hey, is this really yours? And again, that's where the government, right? We just go to a service and assume, hope that they're going to do that. Now, obviously, we have to do our research and make sure that the company really does do that. But I think that's where these companies can make a big difference.
It's really a supply chain issue in some sense.
Yeah.
All right, my other question was with respect to user behaviors on networks. We made a lot of jokes, about the coffee shop networks, and I don't think anyone rational that cares about privacy or security would use that Wi-Fi to do really anything. You know, I carry a company-issued device, which is my own hotspot. You know, it's password protected, broadband that produces my own Wi-Fi that nobody else can use. I use it everywhere. So in the government, you have to balance, well, there's free here, free there, free everywhere, versus the data plan, because you're not going to give everyone one of those devices in the government. That leaves you with the broadband cellular. So what's the process for balancing cost of data versus don't use free Wi-Fi because it's dangerous?
I think we just assume that basically anything outside of that phone is hostile. So, you know, if I go to a name brand coffee company, are they trustworthy versus the guy at the end of the street? Well, they're both networks I don't own. So there's a lot of opportunity for interception. So you just have to design your mobile environment for interception. You have to assume that at some point my device is going to get intercepted. Somebody's going to try doing something with it, and that's where you have to build in that security so that if somebody does try doing something, you're at least alerted. And you have to make the system resilient enough that, hey, if there is a bad access point out there and they do try accessing your machine, the system is resilient enough to resist that.
Sure. So bottom line, we can take on this challenge. We just have to be careful with it. Fair enough?
Yeah.
As we close?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, we are out of time, but I just wanted to get that final yes from Vincent before we close. I want to thank today's guests. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This is Federal News Radio 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. You can find all this discussion online in its entirety, federalnewsradio.com. Your search term, Lookout.
On behalf of Lookout and Carasoft, thank you for joining us. A link to the archive session will be sent to you shortly. If you requested a training certificate, you will receive an email with download instructions after the webinar. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.